seems uncertain. My weary heart can't take much more surprise. I wish there was a point on the horizon, something I could see with my own eyes. I need to tell you that I'm scared. I feel completely unprepared, and nothing's what it was 2 weeks ago. But you already know. You already know everything I'm scared of, everything I hope. You hold my tomorrow and all tomorrow holds. You already know. I can't seem to find the easy answers. Someday I hope the suffering makes sense. I just need to know that you are with me, even if you keep me in suspense. We talk so much these days because I have so much to say. You stay and listen to me closely, even though you already know. You already know everything I'm scared of, everything I hope. You hold my tomorrow and all tomorrow holds. You already know whatever I'm feeling, whatever is coming, whenever the ending, you're already there. You go before me, you go behind me. Wherever I'm going, you're already there. 'Cause you already know. You already know everything I'm scared of, everything I hope. You hold my tomorrow and all tomorrow holds. You already know. You already know.
Well, good morning and welcome to Redstone Church online. We are so glad that you have chosen to join us today. We're out here in the midst of God's beautiful creation overlooking our city. And we recognize that as we begin this morning, we don't know what tomorrow holds. You don't know what tomorrow holds. But we believe that we follow a God who does, that He already knows, He holds the future, and He is worthy of our trust. And so we want to encourage and equip and inspire you to follow Jesus. So we're going to sing a few songs together this morning, and wherever you are, we invite you to sing along with us. And then we're going to begin a new series with Andy Stanley called Better For It. So I'm going to turn it back over to Justin and Cheyenne, and they'll lead us in singing together as we celebrate who God is and what He's done for us.
People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. Don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. And fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Whoa. Jesus, our redemption, our salvation is in His blood. And Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. And fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. See, whoa.
Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus.
Wherever you are this morning, sing it out. Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Is in His blood. And Jesus, light of heaven, a friend forever, his kingdom come. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And from my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name, and I've been born again into a family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Oh, 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 you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me and I will stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. You drowned my fears in perfect love. You rescued me and I will stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
What a great reminder this morning that our identity is not defined by the things that are going on around us, but instead it's defined by who God says we are. That's especially true for those of us who put our faith and trust in Jesus, who follow him and have surrendered to his finished work on the cross on our behalf. And that's true for all of us, no matter what we have going on in our lives, in any season, and especially this one. And today, I want to remind a special group of people that this is how we're praying for you, that we want you to remember that you are defined by who God says you are. And that group is our graduating seniors. So to Mary Caroline and Christian and Sebastian and Sam, first of all, congratulations for finishing high school and crossing that threshold. That's a big milestone. We're excited for you. But we also recognize this is not how you thought your senior year would end. And so with all the changes and adjustments and transitions that you're going through, we want to make sure that we remind you specifically today of who God says you are. He says you are his child. You are in him, and as you follow him in faith, I want you to stand firm on the foundation that Jesus' definition of who you are is more important than what anybody else says about you. So no matter where you're off to college, around the Southeast and the Midwest, we want you to know that we're proud of you. We're excited for you, and we are praying for you, that you will hold fast to your faith in Jesus as you step into this next phase of your life. Now, as we continue this morning, we're going to share a message with you from Andy Stanley called Better For It. And as we do, let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your amazing grace poured out in your perfect love that adopts us as children of God, redeems us, and makes us whole in ways that we can barely describe. God, I pray that you will focus our hearts and our minds on you and who you say we are above everything else. That we'll be reminded that we are not defined by our circumstances, we're not defined or identified by the things that are going on around us, but by who we are in you. God, I pray especially for our graduating seniors, that they will hold on to that truth. As they step out into their college experience, whatever that looks like now, in places all over the country, God, we pray that you will draw them to you in a unique way, sustain them and carry them as they go on this journey, and that you will grow them in their relationship with you. God, I pray for all of us that we will follow Jesus all the more. We thank you that we can do that because Jesus died and rose again. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So here's something I bet we all have in common. I'm kind of ready for things to get back to normal, aren't you? I mean, it's kind of been fun. It's sort of been a break. I say fun. For some people, it's been fun to have a break. For other people, it's just 100% stress. And, you know, we're all somewhere on that continuum. But for the most part, I think we're all ready for things to get back to normal. But in light of what we've experienced and in light of what we've learned, it would probably be a shame for us to just go back to the normal. So right now, there are a lot of people talking about the new normal. In fact, I bet you've talked about the new normal. Now, as you know, some of the new normal may be forced on us, but here's the thing, and here's what we're going to talk about for the next 3 weeks. If we're wise, we will pause and ask the question, what have I learned? What have we learned? And what do we want to carry forward? We'll pause and ask the question, what have I learned? What have we learned? And what do we want to carry forward? Now, here's something I've learned. In fact, here's something I think we've all learned, that the producers of the Mad Max movies, you remember from the late 70s and 80s and early 90s, the Mad Max movies, the producers had it wrong. The producers had it wrong because here's what we've all learned. The most valuable commodity during an apocalypse is not oil. It's what? That's right. It's toilet paper. It's toilet paper. And I think somebody should make a movie about that. And of course, the perfect title would be Game of Thrones. But that's taken. Anyway, so the question we're going to ask for the next few weeks is how can we take what we've learned and carry it into the future? Or to the title of this series, how can we be better for it? How can we be better for it? How can we be better as a result of what we've all just experienced? It was forced on us, but we're coming through this. How can we be better for what we've just experienced? And if we don't stop and ask this question, we will forget. And it would be a shame because pain without gain, you know this, pain without any gain is a shame. Now, I realize for some of you, you are not ready to ask this question because your response to me so far is, Andy, I can't think about how to be better for it because I'm still in it. In fact, I'm just beginning to suffer the consequences of what we've just been through. So, hey, thanks. Maybe later I'll check back in, but I can't begin asking the question, how can I be better for it? Because I'm right in the middle of it. But I just want to push back on that just a little bit. And I realize I'm stepping out because I don't know your circumstances. I don't know your pain. I don't know what you're going through right now. I don't know how this has affected you and your family specifically. But here's what I do know. If we don't pay attention, we will not benefit from it. And our tendency will be to rush back to the old normal and miss the lessons learned in this new season or this new normal. Now, to help us understand this just a little bit better, C.S. Lewis, many years ago, in his little book, The Problem of Pain, explores this very tension of what should we learn and when is it too early to begin learning. Here's what he wrote in The Problem of Pain. He said, my own experience is something like this. I'm progressing along the path of life in my ordinary, contentedly fallen and godless condition, absorbed in a merry meeting with my friends for the morrow or a bit of work that tickles my vanity when suddenly a stab of abdominal pain that threatens serious disease, or perhaps a headline in the newspaper that threatens all of us with destruction, sends this whole pack of cards tumbling down. And at first, he says, I'm overwhelmed that all my little happinesses look like broken toys. But then slowly and reluctantly, bit by bit, I try to bring myself into the frame of mind that I should be in at all times. And perhaps, by God's grace, I succeed. And for a day or two, isn't that our experience? And for a day or two, I become a creature consciously dependent on God and drawing its strength from the right sources. But the moment the threat is withdrawn, and you already know what comes next, right? And the reason you know and the reason I know is because it's our story. We've been there, right? For some of you, your story went like this 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Your husband or wife came to you and said, okay, if you don't change, I'm done. I'm out of here. We've talked and counseled, and I don't see any permanent change. And suddenly he or she had your attention. You sat up straight and you began making changes, right? You began coming home earlier. You started listening better. You paid more attention to the kids. You paid more attention to what he asked and what she asked. And suddenly you became a better husband. You became a better wife, and the marriage got better for a while. But the moment the threat was withdrawn, you began to retreat to your old ways, your old normal, your normal. Or maybe you're a single woman, and maybe your story was something like this, that you discovered, or you at least thought, that you were pregnant. And it scared you to death. And suddenly your religious past came crashing down on top of you. And maybe you prayed for the first time in a long time, and you begged God, and you promised God, and you promised change. And then you discovered that you weren't pregnant, and you were so relieved, and you were a different person. And you behaved yourself, and you stepped back into the standards that you had always embraced growing up for a while. But once the threat was withdrawn, you began to drift back into those normal ways. Or maybe your story is this. You had that scary physical, and your doctor looked at you and said, look, we've talked about this before, and if you don't make changes, you will not be around to play with your grandchildren. You certainly won't be around to play with your great-grandchildren. And he or she got your attention, and you went home and you got serious, and you dieted and you exercised, and people began to say, hey, you're looking better, and you felt better. Everything was better. And for a while, you stuck with it. But then what happened? Well, once the threat was withdrawn. You drifted back to normal. And all of these scenarios, and there are more, you've got your own story. All of these scenarios make me think, what is wrong with us? Why do we have to be led to the brink of disaster before we are willing to make the changes that we've known all along we need to make? Back to C.S. Lewis. Here's how he finishes this idea. But the moment the thread is withdrawn, my whole nature, and look at this verb, this is great, my whole nature leaps back to the toys. God has had me but for 48 hours, and then only by dint of taking everything else away from him. But let him sheathe that sword for a moment. And here's what I want us to avoid. And this is why we're going to talk about this for the next few weeks. Because in order for us to gain through this pain, we have to be intentional. Otherwise, we will all drift back to the normal that we used to have and never learn anything from it. And that's why I wanted to poke and prod just a little bit for the next few weeks. Listen to how he finishes this idea. But let him sheathe that sword for a moment. And I behave like a puppy, that when the hated bath is over, and if you have dogs, you know exactly where this is going. I behave like a puppy that when the hated bath is over, I shake myself as dry as I can, and I race off to reacquire my comfortable dirtiness. If not in the nearest manure heap, at least in the nearest flower bed. Now here's the thing, and you know this, and this is true of all of us. It is human nature to return to bad habits once the pain associated with those bad habits is gone, right? It's human nature. It's human nature to return to our bad habits once the pain associated with those bad habits is gone. In other words, it's human nature to want to get back to whatever normal was. But here's the thing, and you know this, right? Aspiring to normal? Come on. That's not very inspiring, right? So here's the question we're going to wrestle to the ground for the next 3 weeks. How can we be better for it? In other words, it's, you've heard don't let a good thing go to waste. That's true. Well, don't let a bad thing go to waste. In fact, in this situation, it would be worse to allow a bad thing to go to waste. And it is not too soon. And again, I don't know your circumstances, but my hunch is this. It is not too soon to begin asking this question. It's not too soon to begin this discussion. It's not too soon to begin taking inventory and to ask the question, what have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? What have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? Or the flip side is simply this. What should I begin doing now? What should I begin doing that I should have been doing all along? So today, what I want to do to get the discussion kicked off, I want to talk about 3 specific areas. And honestly, the first 2 are going to be a little bit painful. The first 2, you may feel like I'm being a little bit insensitive, that I'm doing more meddling than speaking or preaching, but I want you to hang in there with me. And the reason it's going to be uncomfortable, it feels like it's too soon to talk about this, but it is not too soon. While the pressure is on, this is the time when we learn the most. This is the time when we gain the most perspective. And what a shame it would be to lose these lessons, to lose these learnings, and to lose this perspective. So I want to talk about 3 areas today, and then next week, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about your superpower. You have a superpower. You have a special ability that empowers you to be better for anything you face in life. So next week, we're going to come back and talk about your superpower. So don't miss next week. But to sort of get us started, let's jump in here. How can you be, this is number 1 of 3, how can you be better for it financially? How can you be better for what we just went through? How can you be better for it financially? What have you been doing that almost led to your undoing financially? Or perhaps what have you been doing that actually led to your undoing financially? What financial habit caught up with you in this difficult season? Or ask it this way, what do you wish you'd been doing financially that would have set you up to be in a better place now? And whatever comes to mind, and you have an answer to this question, here's my challenge. Begin now. Now is the time to face up to 2 financial realities. In fact, there are several financial realities we need to face up to. But if you will use the pressure you're feeling right now, even perhaps the chaos in your finances right now, to begin asking these important questions, you will be better for it later. And I just want to talk about 2 financial realities that are looming large for many of us. Number 1, I want is better than I owe. If you have been a part of this broadcast or part of one of our churches for very long, you've heard us talk about this before. I want is better than I owe. In other words, it is better to go without things you don't need than to owe money on things you don't need. It is better to go without things you don't need, there's a tension there, than to owe money on things you don't need. There's a tension there. There's a tension either way you go. But the tension of I owe is far worse than the tension of I want. The second financial reality that looms large right now that serves as a reminder and perhaps sets you up to be better for it is this. A financial hole, and you're going to hate me for this, but a financial hole is always due in part to a lack of self-control. That a financial hole, and I made it rhyme so you'll remember it, a financial hole is usually, maybe always, but let's just say usually due to a lack of self-control. Let me illustrate it this way. Before this crisis, you had this thought: if only I had more money, if only I had more money, if only I made more money. During the crisis, you had this thought: if only I'd saved more money, if only I had saved more money, which is the same thing as saying, if only in the past I had exercised better self-control. That a financial hole is usually due in part to a lack of self-control. And if you are facing the consequences of a lack of self-control financially, now is the time to write that down, to learn this lesson, and never, ever do what you did in the past again so that you would be ready for the future. The writer of Proverbs states it this way, and he gives us a word picture that is really not very relevant to our current situation, or certainly relevant to our current culture, but it's a powerful word picture from ancient times. Here's what he wrote. He said, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Like a city whose walls are broken through. Again, for us, this is meaningless. But in ancient times, the walls around a city represented security and peace and prosperity and safety. And when an enemy would come, they would pick the weakest part of the wall and they would use weapons of warfare, siege warfare, to eventually break through or create a breach or a break in the wall, and the enemy would pour through the wall. And here's what the writer is saying. That a city, when the walls are broken through, the people within the city, they lose their security, they lose their safety, and they lose their autonomy. They lose their ability to control their own lives. And here's his point. That a lack of self-control, and this is true for any area of life, a lack of self-control leads to a loss of control. That a lack of self-control in any area of life ultimately leads to a loss of control. And let me ask you this. What do you want pretty much more than anything in life? You want control of your life. The key to having control of your life is to exercise self-control. And consequently, because of what we've just been through, you may be learning this lesson the hard way financially. I want you to be better for it. You want to be better for it. Now is the time to take some of these simple ideas, these common sense ideas, and elevate them so that you don't pass this way again if, in fact, something like this were ever to happen again. A lack of self-control always leads to a loss of control. Now, here's something you've heard before. I bet somewhere in the past, somebody either gave you this advice or you heard someone talking about having been given this advice. And the advice was to have 3 to 6 months of savings set aside in case of an emergency. Have you ever heard that before? Everybody's nodding yes, you've heard that before. And here's my hunch. When you heard that for the first time, or maybe you read that in a book for the first time, you thought to yourself, that's a really good idea. I should set aside 3 to 6 months of living expenses just in case there's an emergency. And if you took that advice which requires extraordinary self-control, then you are better for what we've just been through. If you didn't take that advice, you're wishing you had. Now is the time. Now is the time to create a plan to set money aside in case there's a financial bump. That is wisdom. That way, when your walls are attacked, they will not be broken through because your self-control in creating an emergency fund has prepared you for the future. But an emergency fund requires what? It requires extraordinary self-control. So decide now to start now. How can you be better? How can you be better for it financially? Simple. You've heard it 1,000 times. Save more, spend less, get out and stay out of debt. Save more, spend less, get out and stay out of debt. One more thing on the financial piece. if this particular season has hit you particularly hard, your tendency will be to blame the virus and your boss and perhaps the economy. And that's a mistake. Certainly the virus contributed to it. Certainly your working situation contributed to it. Certainly the economy has contributed to it. But here's what I want to say, and this is hard. Perhaps you contributed to your situation as well, and you must own that slice of the pie, and now is the time to own it, and now is the time to make decisions so that you never face this situation again. Take responsibility for your finances, embrace all that common sense you've heard your whole life, exercise self-control, and prepare for the future. Take notes, make a plan, decide to be better for it. Next up, number 2, how can you be better for it relationally? How can you be better for it relationally? What have you experienced these past few months relationally that you want to carry forward into the future? I think one of the things that we've all experienced is the value of friendship and the value of our friends, right? But there may be a negative side to all this for you. And if so, I want you to pay attention. Perhaps you've noticed or you've experienced some unaddressed cracks in your marriage. Some unaddressed cracks in your marriage, things that you'd sort of put to the periphery, things that came up from time to time, but you were busy, and the old normal allowed you to ignore what was right there in front of you. Perhaps what you've noticed is a lack of common ground with one of your kids. Maybe a lack of common ground with all of your kids. You're spending so much time with your family and you recognize, I've never really developed an actual relationship with one or all of my kids because I've been so busy. I mean, isn't it true that quarantining has highlighted the good and the not so good relationally? So here's the opportunity I don't want you to miss. This is so important. COVID-19 may actually serve as a wake-up call to you relationally, if you wake up. So, wake up. If there are cracks in your relationships at home, now is the time to address them. Rushing back to normal is going to empower you to continue to ignore them. You know this, relationship problems don't fix themselves. So now is the time to address these relationship issues. Right now you have a little bit of extra time, but more importantly, you've got a little bit more pressure because of what's going on or what's not going on at home. And before you begin pointing fingers, it's the same with your finances. Own your slice of the conflict pie. Own your slice of the conflict pie. In fact, if you get this right, your story of COVID-19, and eventually this is just a story we tell, right? Your story of COVID-19 may be this, that it was actually the catalyst that saved our marriage. If you pay attention to this attention, and if you do the difficult work that faces you right now, rushing back to normal will only allow what's bad to get worse. Right now, what we're facing is forcing us to face perhaps what we've neglected. Perhaps your story will be this. COVID-19 was the catalyst for repairing my relationship with my son. Perhaps your story will be COVID-19 was the catalyst for repairing my relationship with my daughter. Relationally speaking, and I don't think we can exaggerate this, all of this pain with no gain would certainly be an extraordinary, extraordinary shame. Last thing, number 3. How can you be better for it personally? How can you be better for it personally? And when I say personally, I'm talking about internally. Let me ask it this way. How is your worldview holding up? How is your worldview holding up? You know what your worldview is. It's the way that you see and interpret and explain how the world works. And when difficult time comes, sometimes our foundations are rocked. And if your foundation, your worldview has been rocked, you should pay attention to that. Do you find yourself asking questions that you've never asked before? If you're not a particularly religious person, have you found yourself praying for the first time in a long time? Maybe you went and found a Bible for the first time in a long time. If you are a particularly religious person, has your faith been rattled? Did you perhaps discover that your faith was more fragile than you imagined? Did you find yourself asking questions, or do you find yourself asking questions you've never asked before? Questions like, where's God? How could God? Or I thought God. So here's my point. Regardless of which side of the faith aisle you're on, regardless of which side of the faith aisle you're on, if this current season has created tension on the inside, pay attention to that tension. It means you are on the verge of learning something new or being reminded of something that you've forgotten. It could lead somewhere good, and it could certainly lead somewhere better. My friend Kate Bowler said this, and I wasn't sure if I'd heard her say it or actually had read it in her book, but here's her quote, and I'll tell you how I found it in just a second. Here's what Kate Bowler wrote. She says this: "There's a little prosperity gospel in all of us." There's a little prosperity gospel in all of us. And the prosperity gospel is this gospel that says basically good things come to good people and bad things come to bad people. That just kind of what goes around comes around, and what comes around goes around. That you sort of earn your way through life, and that God favors certain kinds of people because of their behavior. And in spite of the fact that you may reject that kind of theology, I think she's right. There is a little bit of that thinking in all of us, that God owes me. Or if you don't believe in God, that life owes me, or karma owes me, or somebody owes me because I have been a good person and I have lived a good life. Now, Kate is actually a professor at Duke Divinity School. She's also a cancer survivor, and she has written from her pain, and she's basically put her life and her pain out there for the whole world to see and to examine in an effort to help people understand what it means to navigate difficult times. In fact, she wrote a little book that Sandra and I both read. It's entitled, "Everything Happens for a Reason," and I love the subtitle, "And Other Lies I've Loved." So, as I mentioned, I actually texted Kate to make sure I got her quote right and make sure it was either something she said or something from her book. And as we texted back and forth and I told her what we were going to talk about, here's what she communicated to me in her text. She wrote this. She said, "Each of us, through the accidental narcissism of wanting to be happy." Don't you want to be happy? I want to be happy. And in wanting to be happy, she says, we kind of find ourselves tripped up in this accidental narcissism. What an insight. We get confused about what we actually deserve. And then she wrote this: "The world cannot help us know the difference between who is righteous and who is just plain lucky." Now, here's my point. If this season has kind of rocked your world in terms of your internal world, if this season has rocked your worldview, if this season has rocked your faith, pay attention to that tension. You may be on the verge of learning something new, or you may be on the verge of being reminded of something old. If current events have left you wrestling with God questions, and you're not a religious person, and you just assumed you left that wrestling ring years ago, but now you find yourself wrestling with God questions, pay attention to that. And if you're a Christian, pay attention to this tension as well. You may discover a different kind of faith. You may discover a better faith. You may discover a different version of faith. And perhaps in this season, you will finally give up your faith in the non-existent God who doesn't allow bad things to happen to good people. And in this season, you may come face to face with the God who allowed the worst possible thing to happen to the best possible person, his son. And he did that on your behalf. So the point is simply this: we're going to get through this. Things are going to become more normal, but let's make sure we are better for it. Let's make sure that we're better for it financially. Let's make sure that we're better for it relationally, and let's make sure that we are better for it personally. Because, and you know this, pain, all this pain without any gain would certainly be a shame. So let's face and embrace the lessons we've learned, and let's for sure face and embrace the perspective we've gained. Let's all decide, and it begins today, let's all decide that we are going to be better for it. Let's not do what C.S. Lewis referred to when he said, let's not behave like a puppy when the hated bath is over. And this hated season will come to an end. This hated bath will be over. But let's not race off to the nearest flower bed. And let's certainly not roll around in the nearest manure heap. Let's not forget what we've learned. Let's not lose this perspective. And to help you do that, I want to make a suggestion. Now, some of you aren't going to like this, and that's okay. We're going to talk about it for 3 weeks. Some of you are going to love this. But because it's so easy for us to forget, Because it's so easy and because we're so prone to just move on, I want to encourage you as you think about what you want to carry forward from this season, I want to encourage you to come up with a way to remember. I want you to actually create a reminder, to find a physical object, or perhaps make or craft a physical object, or maybe it's something you already own, and I want you to attach a memory to this object, something that will remind you of this season and what you want to carry forward from it. And I want you to take this object, whatever it might be, and I want you to place it somewhere prominent in your life so that you see it and you're reminded. Maybe it'll be simply a reminder to slow down. Maybe it'll be a reminder of the value of friendships that you've neglected. Maybe it'll be a reminder to kind of dig in and deal with the crack in your relationships at home. Maybe a reminder to invest in that son or that daughter that is not like you and consequently you've just had a hard time connecting with. Perhaps it's a reminder of who or what's most important. Perhaps it's simply a reminder of something we've all learned that, well, we have far more in common with people than not. But I want you to come up with a reminder and place it somewhere where you can be reminded. And you have 2 or 3 weeks to do this because we're going to talk about this for the next couple of weeks. Basically, what I want us to all do is, because of what we've learned and the perspective we've gained, I want us to begin writing a better story as we all move forward. Because as I said earlier, eventually, COVID-19, this whole season, is simply going to be a story we tell. So this week, 2 questions. How can I be better for it? How can I be better for it? And what will help me remember? How can I be better for it? And what will help me remember? Normal, or even the new normal, is right around the corner. I can't wait for us to get there. I think we're all looking forward to it. And I'll just be honest, I'm even looking forward. I know you're not going to believe me. I'm actually looking forward to us being together. And I'm actually even looking forward to being interrupted by crying babies and obnoxious ringtones. So I am looking forward to normal, even the new normal. And we'll get there soon enough. But let's not miss this unprecedented and hopefully once in a lifetime opportunity to learn everything we can and to gain the perspective that will serve us well in the future. Let's not merely settle for getting through this. Let's decide to be better for it. Now, next week, as I said, I'm going to come back and talk about your superpower. You actually have a superpower. You have an ability to ensure that everything that comes your way makes you better. You can be better for it. I don't want you to miss that, so don't miss next week. Now, as always, I've got a few questions I'd love for you to answer, and I'd love for you to begin that discussion today with whoever you're watching this with, or if you're doing Zoom groups with a small group, or you have a group of friends where you discuss messages, or you're just discussing life. Here's the 3 questions I'd love for you to wrestle to the ground as we prepare for next week. Question number 1, where have you felt the most pressure during this season? Financially, relationally, spiritually, maybe something else. Number 2, is there anything you should have been doing that would have better prepared you for what you are currently experiencing? Is there anything you should have been doing that would have better prepared you for what you're currently experiencing? And number 3, what can you begin doing now? And that's where the tension is, isn't it? What can you begin doing now to ensure you will be better for it later? That's it for me. And now I'm going to turn it over to your host.
Well, thank you for joining us here at Redstone Church online this Sunday. We are so honored to be a part of this city and what God is doing here. We know He is at work rescuing, redeeming, and revitalizing each one of us and our whole community. We hope that you've been encouraged today and reminded of the truth about how God loves you and how much He has poured out His grace on us. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Hope you have a fantastic week, and we will see you next time.